right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today at the beautiful outdoor stage. So maybe we'll just start with those quick introductions. Martin, would you like to start?
Yes. Hello, Morten Skoga, Node VC, Stockholm-based VC, focused on early stage investments in Nordic companies, including New Nordics. I've been an investor for 5 years. Before that, I was a deep tech entrepreneur for 20 years. And with Node, we've tried to build the investor we wanted as founders. So we have a team with a lot of operational experience, quite a few ex-founders. And we're also backed by 60 tech entrepreneurs. And we claim to know a bit of tech ourselves. We've built products and technology and scaled it internationally and brought them to IPO and so. So that's my background.
Fantastic. Mindaugas.
Hey, my name is Mindaugas. I'm CEO and co-founder at Lea AI. And actually, we are on the mission to give access to personal AI coaching to everyone on the planet. So if you could imagine, probably every one of you have, one item in your New Year's resolution wish list, right? And probably it is improve yourself in like personal or professional skills. And usually what you do, you hire a tutor, coach, or any other expert to get the results just faster, right? It's expensive, it's hard to find them, and then it's really people judging you, right? So with Lea, actually, you can get access to all that, and it speaks with you real time. It's AI, it's artificial, and it helps to reach any of your goals. And right now, we're focusing actually on the English learning and English speaking part of English learning. And yeah, doing quite well and looking to raise another round next year to reach our other milestones. Besides that, I'm also a seasonal CEO and in a startup world more than 10 years as investor and board member. And yeah, really like the space and would glad to share with the community what we learned so far. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'll have to teach you some Australian slang that you can add to your English tuition. I think that might be fun. Suhas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Suhas Gante. I'm from San Francisco, where I spent 8 years building, founding, operating, and eventually advising and consulting for several startups all across the US in different spaces. And then I moved to Madrid, Spain about 3 years ago, where I currently live. And there I mostly advise and consult for European startups that would like to expand to the US, either for VC funding or also for GTM expansion, sales expansion, etc. Besides that, I also help run something called Fundraising School. I know there's many alumni here, so I'm excited to see many of you in real life. And it's a school to help everybody from Eastern Europe raise money from VCs with pitch decks that actually get funded. So very excited to be here.
Fantastic, and great to have you here as well. I'm going to start with a kind of general question, and then we're going to dig more into the minutiae as we go along in our discussion today. Maybe, Suhas, you could start. So when we talk about failure, when we talk about entrepreneurship and startups, we're in a fairly unique position on stage. We've got 3 people that have backgrounds not only in startups, but investment. So what are most of the common kind of elements you're seeing? Maybe your own experience, or it could be in a general sense.
Sure. I think when you start a startup, there's a very high chance of failure. I think it's 80 or 90%. And even my own startup I started back in 2016, we failed in about 2 years. We went through 500 startups. We raised money from VCs. We thought we were doing all the right things, but eventually we failed, which unfortunately is much more common than being successful. It's just the reality and the risks we take. I think there's many things that we can do now, and we on the stage can help you to determine what things you can do to avoid the failure outcome. I think one of the biggest ones that anybody should take away right now is just prepare. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. and just look at alternatives from day zero. Because almost always, everybody ends up pivoting. And most successful companies I've advised or invested in usually almost have always had one or two pivots before getting to big success.
Absolutely. Maybe Martin, you might have some thoughts as well you'd like to share from your experience as an investor? Or personally?
Yeah, so I think both as an investor and as an entrepreneur, I think, as a VC investor, we want to invest in companies with really bold visions, trying to build something that can become huge. And that, of course, comes with a high risk. What I personally like is when you're able to sort of, I think it's important to work very closely with customers at an early stage, not trying to build something at home and then just trying to push it out to market, but working closely with customers to verify that what you're building is really a must-have for the customers. Personally, in sort of my journey, we tried to find stepping stones where the products we were going to conquer the world with could actually add value at an immature stage in a modest-sized community with a high willingness to pay. So I think we tried to build a story where each fundraising could take us to profitability. Then usually you want to raise the next round on the way there. So, but I think that's something that is good to at least have in mind as a founder.
Absolutely. I think you've both raised some really good points around being able to pivot, having customers throughout your journey, testing your products as you develop. I know once I interviewed a company doing IoT smart homes for visually impaired people, and they actually got to the stage of delivering the product to customers, but they'd never actually had it tested by anyone who was visually impaired. So it still happens, this kind of stuff. But Mindaugas, I'm curious, how important for you as someone who's an entrepreneur currently is it to have investors on board or board members perhaps who've had an experience in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Actually, when is good times, so everyone is, great, praising you, want to spend time with you, and so on. And the real face of investors you see when the bad times come. And we had bad times, and not once. And that is super important when investors are not new players in the game, but they personally went through this, founder steps and so on, or backed the founders who already did that. They understand that the success is, as mentioned at my colleague, like it's over multiple pivots. And it's not about asking, the numbers, another report, and so on, but just, supporting in these hard times and understanding that, not everything is great. So yeah, it's super important to have experienced investors, and we were, honestly speaking, really picky when we are kind of bringing investors on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know backstage we were talking about what kind of support means when we talk about dealing with setbacks or failure, whichever term you like to use, whether that's, mentoring or some type of peer support or other things. I'd be interested to ask a question for everybody. When you've had struggles, what would have been most helpful that wasn't available? Maybe you'd like to start, Sugas?
Yeah, sure. With my own startup, which eventually ended up failing, I wish I had much more help day to day with GTM or sales or things I just was not good at back then. And it just wasn't available so many years ago. So I think there's many ways that investors, advisors can be of help. It can be with very specific tasks, like helping you figure out a GTM strategy or fix your pitch deck. But there's also an emotional component that they can bring to the table as well, especially if they've failed themselves. They've gone through the roller coasters as well. So right now, a lot of my work doing advisory work, consulting work, is focused on helping these startups tackle those exact same challenges I personally had so many years ago in my own journey. And it's something I've really dedicated myself to ensuring the next stage of entrepreneurship has that covered and is not a barrier to being successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mindigus, a question for you. How important has it been as your company's evolved to be able to, I guess, have that agility to pivot? And maybe you could provide some examples of things that you've had to change that you thought originally were going to work, perhaps were not so successful?
It's a good question, and I have one good example. So when we
Yeah.
started 4 years ago, it was a different product. It was Oxus. It was speech analytics for call centers and for non-English speaking countries with a focus. So we built pretty decent tech behind, beating Google, Microsoft, other known brands, and so on. We raised around at that time. It was close to 1 million. And unfortunately, we did like so many efforts, so many pivots on that particular product. But over 2 years, we couldn't find product market fit. And it was at this moment when you like needed to make a decision, should we persevere or should we pivot? And yeah, it came one time when you did the calculation on your runway. You measured your bets and like how potentially you can win with this product that you were working for 2 years and couldn't find product market fit. Yeah, and we made a decision to pivot. And we did 4 pivots, and Lea was the 4th one. Actually, one left 1 month till the end of the runway. So yeah, that's the story.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot to deal with. And Morten, I know you've had a background in deep tech as an entrepreneur, doing some of the hardest tech as well. Perhaps you might have something to share?
Yeah, it wasn't just a straight line up, if you put it that way. But I think from the outside, you really don't see the challenges. Actually, in the early days of my second startup, I made some really bad decisions, choosing a supplier. We just brought in 10 million euro in venture capital. I chose a supplier against the strong recommendation of one of my co-founders. And that ended up costing me 4 years. We built communication devices that we put in the hands of individuals in wheelchairs. And we had lithium polymer battery catching fire.
Oh, Jesus.
So it was a constant firefighting from our perspective. No one got hurt. We came out well. The specification of the product, customers loved it. And we sort of broadened the market. And we created a market that didn't really exist. But we had so many recalls, so many challenges. I thought the company was going to go bankrupt. And what I wished, I started my first company back in '99, and there wasn't really an ecosystem, and it was hard to find role models and people to talk to. This was, yeah, it was hard to find data. We were reinventing too many wheels.
Yeah.
But I think what I would, and what we're trying to build with Node as well is sort of, our thesis is, okay, we're backed by 60 tech entrepreneurs. We're tech entrepreneurs ourselves. We've been on that journey. What I believe is that, whether you've failed or not, having been on the journey for a while, no successful entrepreneur has not failed on the way there. And I think that it's about resilience. I look at myself. It's pure luck I'm here. In the taxi towards Arlanda in Stockholm yesterday, I was 99% sure I was going to miss the flight. There was a car crash on going up north. But I want to back resilient entrepreneurs who run until it's not possible anymore. I arrived at Arlanda 15 minutes before departure. And I refused to give up, and here I am. And I think it's many times, it looks like there is no way out. This is going to totally break down. But I think it's important as an investor, as an entrepreneur, when you're there, you're sort of you're too deep into it to really lift yourself outside and get a bigger perspective. You need someone to talk to, and as an investor, I think it's important to be that coach. We want to invest enough to be able to spend time with the entrepreneurs we back, and we want to be the person that the entrepreneurs bring up the problems to, not the solution. We want to be part of that process and give the outside perspective and sort of help them realize that perhaps it's actually not impossible.
I guess a question for all of you, and maybe Suhas, you could start. How important is early intervention, identifying there's a problem and then knowing who to talk to and so on?
The earlier the better. I think if there's founders in the audience listening, the one thing I would urge you to do actionably, you can even do it today, is in your next investor update, make sure there's a section called challenges and just list all the things that are not going well with the company and just publicize it with your trusted investors. If they are truly value-add investors, if they're truly value-add advisors, they'll pick up the phone or email you right back and help you talk through those challenges. So the earlier you surface that challenge, the more time we have to help figure it out with you, not after it becomes a really big issue that we can't tackle together.
What about you, Mindegos? Do you have some thoughts around speed here when we're talking about challenges?
Yeah, so you have challenge when you're a founder, so it's like it's obvious. It's always the challenge to choose not what not to do, but which important things not to do, because there are even more important things, and you're constantly juggling between the priorities. But good point about sharing with the investors also bad things. We constantly, it's from my own experience, from very early days, like how we build the relationships with the investors. When I meet the investor and we see a fit, like today or maybe in the future, and we have a good vibe, so we just agreed to put him on our newsletter, monthly newsletter. And we constantly sharing, like on monthly basis, our lowlights, highlights, challenges, the focus items, and the help that we're looking for. And guess what? Like right now in our newsletter, probably there are more than 200 investors, and the ones who really walk the talk about helping founders, etc. So they respond and they help. But the vast majority, you don't get anything from them, right? So that's how you can, I don't know, pretty early spot and see which investors really walk the talk, as I said. Yeah.
Sounds like that could almost be a criteria for startups choosing investors, right? Yeah. And Morten?
Yeah, and I would recommend picking up the phone, having someone to actually talk to. I think another thing, sort of what I saw on my journey, was the tighter it was, the faster you iterated and the closer the customer you were. I mean, the more money we had, the lower precision it was. So it's super hard. I think now, I mean, these times we've seen now, so many companies are bootstrapping, which is not only a bad thing. It means you have to find the real value for your customer, or you're out of business. And I think it's super important to really find that product market fit at an early stage before you scale. Then of course, I'm not saying you should always have too little money. That's not ideal either. But it's really hard to keep that precision, and it's super hard to build a culture of scarcity where you really, I mean, you always want to feel like, okay, I only could prioritize 1/3 of what I want to achieve. Otherwise, you didn't really have to choose. So we had a mentality of, in the early days, we were always saying that, okay, we need to run really, really, really fast. And as long as we make more good decisions than bad decisions, we will move forward, and we will move forward fast. And I think making decisions and iterating quickly is the important thing. You don't have all the answers, so you need to try a lot of things. And you shouldn't be scared of, I mean, if you get quick no's, that's super good. You want to sort of kill the concepts as early as possible to really understand how you can create value for your customers, and the same with the business model and all these aspects.
I mean, I'm curious. I mean, we've spoken about, you know, things that startups should look at in investors. But really, when we talk about this idea of, I guess, falling forward, how do you cultivate that in the teams or the companies you invest in? How do you kind of make sure that's something that they're able to do with confidence? I think you've kind of alluded to it, Morten, but maybe Suhas, you might like to start with some thoughts?
Sure. I think falling forward is a cultural concept that should be embedded at the early stages of a company. I think day to day, I propose something that's called growth experimentation through data-driven methods. So basically, from the earliest days of a company, you pick 20 ideas to just try. 90% of them will fail, guaranteed. And it's a way to encourage failure from the earliest days, which is trying to grow your market share, we're trying to grow anything that you're trying to do with your company, knowing that most of the ideas will likely fail. This is just something that has to come intrinsically to a company and is just best done through just trying and failing and moving forward. There's not much better way to do it than just doing it and failing it and keep picking up and going. As was mentioned, resilience is probably the single most important characteristic an investor looks for, especially at the earliest stages, because we realize how many failures or lessons learned a founder has to go through before they eventually take off on a unicorn journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything you wanted to add to that?
I think an important part of that is, it of course depends on what you're building, but I too often see companies charging too little. I mean, finding a product market fit, I think an important part of that is charging a lot of money from the customer to sort of, is this, and that's a challenge when you're iterating, but finding a few customers where this pain point is so big, so you can sort of give them the product, but iterate more or less. It can be a project towards them initially. You promise I'm gonna solve your problems, but they have to pay. Unless they pay, they're not going to be committed. Yeah. And you're not going to see if you have a product market fit if they're not willing to pay. So I think the business model is as important as the product.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Mindaugas, in your experience finding investors, what impact has investor rejection, I guess, had on your company in terms of maybe shaping your business model or shaping your product development, etc.?
I mean, rejecting?
Yeah, like when you try to get money from people.
Yeah. So, you know, when you start like early, you get like multiple rejections because vast majority of investors, they look to the traction. You grow, you know, to 1 million ARR like in half a year. Great, I want to invest you. What about if it's not the metric shows that you're building something good, but something else? So that is one part. But another part is that what I discovered is kind of sales to enterprise sales, right? So when we raised the first round, so probably we reached out to more than 2,000-3,000 investors, and it's numbers game. You just, you know, out of 3,000, 500 maybe respond. Out of these 500, 100 agree to look deeper. Then, you know, you have 50 meetings, after 50 meetings, and so on and so on. And that is one thing. And the second thing is, as I mentioned, like starting really early to build the relationships with investors. And in the another round, when we did a pivot, and it left only 1 month actually until the end of the runway, guess who backed us? Backed exactly these investors who were in my newsletters all these 2-3 years, and they saw how we go ups and downs and so on. And yeah, they backed us. Of course, some of existing investors also backed, but that's, I think, the main aspect how to build a long-term relationships with the investors and make sure that they're gonna invest in you in the future. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, we've just got just under 2 minutes, if my eyes are correct. Question maybe for everybody. What's as your experience as investors, either previously or currently, what have you learned from a failed investment? Maybe Morten, do you have any insights there?
Well, in the last few years, I guess we've all seen companies not being able to earn money, have had a hard time raising money. So I guess it's good to go through a few cycles to see how the trends shift. All of a sudden, money is expensive. I've seen some really good concepts not being able to raise funding. Quite a few now. And that's, of course, not ideal, if you put it that way. And I think it was hard to predict because the sentiment back when they started was totally different. But I think agility and speed and those who actually hit the handbrake early on are the ones who have survived and managed to come through this. I think, again, speed and agility is sort of, and resilience, finding ways to, we see quite a few of those companies who sort of survived COVID and then came all of this other stuff. And the ones who iterate really quickly and adapt are the ones who survive.
Yeah, I think that's been a consistent theme throughout our discussion, that agility, that adaptability, getting in with the customer from the get-go, testing your iterations, really important. Sadly, we're out of time. Probably we could have spoken for an hour. It's such an interesting topic. Thank you so much, everybody, for being with me on the stage today, and thanks for having us. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kate Lawrence. She is a shining star in our beautiful ecosystem. Kate, you're bringing the sun. Give me a hug. Good to see you. Thank you so much. One more round of applause for our guests today. We promised you homegrown heroes, and we've definitely given you that. And you know what? While we're at it, give it up for the team here who are bringing the chairs on and off, the mics left, right, and center. Give it up for these guys over here. They're doing a great job throughout the day. So, we've learned about falling forward. Next up, we're mastering the global game, hacking market entry, and overcoming challenges. Who has entered an additional market? Here, give us a wave. If your startup has entered a new market. Okay, there's a few. Yeah, you have as well. Well, maybe we should get you up in a minute. Maybe we could do that. We can make it happen. One of the unique things about doing that is the requirement for localization, the need to have people to understand how you do that. Now, I'm from South Africa, and there's sort of 54 countries on the continent of Africa. Localization is so key. You can't just scale into one as you did another. So, mastering the global game, hacking market entry, we're going to hear from that in a minute. Moderated by the one and only Domus, co-founder and CEO at Growtech. Domus, my friend, how are you? Do you want to welcome your guests on, or should I? I should. All right, I can do that. I'll do. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. As it, Amit Goldman, Associate Venture Fellow, Lead at Digital DX Ventures and Head of Partnerships at Lapsy Health. And of course, Geetis, Fractional CGO Growth Advisor at Cyber Upgrade. Give it up for our wonderful panel.
So thank you, everyone, for being here. I see we not only have challenge of expanding globally, but we have a challenge of weather today. So the ones who arrived today in the Baltic, so here we go. I think we're going to manage that for sure. So today we're going to cover a very important topic, right? Global expansion. It's not something nice to have in today's market. This is something that you must do if you want to build a solid business. And this message should be in your head from the day one. And today we're going to have two amazing speakers, a lot of experience, a lot of tips and tricks to share with you. And I want to give you opportunity to introduce ourselves. So shortly, 1-2 minutes. Amit, let's start with you.
Sure. Pleasure meeting you all. My name is Amit Goldman. I'm a head of partnerships at Lapsy Health. We literally just officially launched our product that we've been building for 2 years, raised almost $6 million from grants and venture capital. And also, I'm an associate and venture fellow lead at Digital DX Ventures. It's a Silicon Valley-based digital DX-focused fund. And we invest in early-stage digital diagnostic startups. I've been previously with a couple of startups. I do advise a couple of startups, and my newest startup that I launched a year and a half ago is right there walking somewhere around and calling mama. That's mine. Sarabelle, I hope it will be a new unicorn in 17 and a half. That's me.
Thank you, Amit.
Hey guys, my name is Giris. I'm in digital marketing for the last 14 years. Started from digital marketing, expanded to marketing in general, then expanded to product, and ended up in growth. And have an experience in both B2C and B2B SaaS. So.
Short and sweet. Okay, let's start from the main question, right? It's quite common sense, but we have all kinds of startups here. You know, super early, some more like advanced startups as well. So could you like elaborate? You know, why the global expansion is important for the startup today? What is your take, Amit?
My take? Well, I can probably speak mostly for the healthcare. I went to med school. That's where I got my education. I did work with one fashion startup, but I was in university. It was my first course, in my first year. So I can mainly speak about healthcare. Now think about healthcare. In Lithuania, we have how many people? 2.8 million? Do you know how many doctors, practicing physicians we have in Lithuania? Roughly? Anyway, I'm not going to torture you here. It's 14,000 physicians. Now, if you want to sell to physicians, you have a market of 14,000. Probably they also specialize in different fields, cardiology, ENT, whatever. So probably the market that you're trying to penetrate is even smaller. So in order to scale, in order to grow, probably you'll have to go elsewhere because it's just a little bit too small. When we think, if you want to sell your product to a clinic, it might be even harder because, for example, odontology clinics, there are only around 13,000 in Lithuania, if not less. And if you want to penetrate with like bigger products that would target hospitals, it's even less and more difficult. For example, if you want to sell, I don't know, electronic healthcare record system or some other type of product, because you'll have to go through a very long process of tenders and public tenders, and you have to find your way in, which might even take a way longer periods of time. So, you know, trying to tap into other countries is really, really important, especially in the healthcare field. And also looking from the patient perspective. If you are trying to pick one or another disease or specific medical condition, you might not even have enough patients to do clinical trials to, you know, sell your product to. So that might be even difficult. And also look around how much of a racial diversity you see around. None, almost. Because Lithuania is a very homogeneous country, and in healthcare, as you probably know, if it's, for example, in digital diagnostics, you have to have all populations represented. So, yeah.
So nowadays, if you're considering the term startup, like most of the startups are digital providers by default, right? Whether it's like entertainment, whether it's knowledge, even the physical devices are now pretty easily distributed globally. So there's like literally zero sense in not going globally. And on the other hand, so Amit gave this example of a small market, right, where you're forced to go out. But imagine the case of Poland. I've been in contact with a few quite a large Polish scale-ups, and what they do is they're basically hiring anyone except Polish people to grow. This is because most of the Polish tech companies are based in Poland and focus only on the Polish market, and they literally don't have, I wouldn't say skills, but like the mindset of going global. So they're hiring Lithuanian talent, they're hiring people from Latvia, hiring people from Estonia. So Poland is this great example of the market with 40 million people or something, and you still have a shortage of talent simply because your companies, your local companies haven't had this routine of consistently going after a global market.
Amit, you want to add something up?
Yes, sorry.
Where's it
I would
going?
love to. And another thing from the healthcare perspective, if you want to launch a startup in the healthcare field, you probably will have to deal with a lot of things that we probably will discuss in a minute. But for clinical trials, a lot of startups, sometimes they don't really take into consideration how much money would that cost to get into the market. It took us at Lapsi Health 2 years, for example. We just launched this year, and 6 million, almost 6 million. And now we're here with FDA approvals. But it takes a really, really very long time. And sometimes potentially local, even venture capital funds or local angels, investors are not able to, pump enough of funds into your project. So tapping into other countries is also important because probably you will get access to the some pools of money that could invest in you to help you grow.
Okay, and let's talk about fails. So, Gitte, you brought some B2B products, B2C products, globally different stuff, right? Like website builders, healthcare products, right now cybersecurity product, before that energy, right? So what are the most common fails you saw in your experience, and how the startup could avoid that?
Again, if we're looking at the definition of a startup, or the way we used to think about it, right? It's the company which is bringing something new to the market, and that something new could be so new that you have to educate the market what the hell you're doing in the first place and why there's a need for something like that, right? Or you have to educate the market about how you uniquely are solving some problem which they already know they have, right? And it doesn't matter whether there is solutions for that problem or not. In my experience, most of the failures with the startups comes basically due to the lack of proper positioning. And the positioning is like, if you were to ask me like 6, 5, 10, 8 years ago, I would tell you what the hell is positioning, right? Because I was like a digital marketing guy focused on performance, CPC, CPM, ROAS, stuff like that. But basically when you start going up the ladder and you start making the strategic decisions, right? I realized that I was just fortunate enough to work with people who already knew what they're doing and they have nailed the positioning already. But if you are the founder or executive branch in the startup, you have to be obsessed with positioning, because if you won't be able to tell your story for people and how you solve their unique problems, you're fucked, literally, especially in B2B SaaS, because people in B2B SaaS are bombarded with many, many, many different messages from many, many different vendors, and if you don't relate with those people's problem, you're just wasting your media budget, you're wasting your PR budget, etc. So for companies who are doing something extremely new, either B2B SaaS or B2C, I would suggest to focus on positioning. And positioning is this super simple, basically, exercise, which just requires, for you to write down a few different things. And one thing is, like, if you were to wrote something from not this, but my delivery, I would suggest you to write a few words. So one word is persona, right? Who is your persona? And the example from Cyber Upgrade would be specifically CTOs who don't have any dedicated cybersecurity people on their company, okay? Because usually those are the people who are approached by CEOs and telling, please take care of the compliance stuff, we don't have anywhere to go, right? The second thing, problem, right? In our case, problem is that we don't have anyone else to give this bullshit task to, so CTO gave me this task, and therefore I'm overloaded, and therefore I cannot do anything else, and I don't know what to do with the compliance, right? Third, alternative, because there's, no matter what you do, like, whether you're in B2B SaaS or B2C, the problems that people have are age-old. So you're not inventing problems. You're basically finding new solutions to the problems that already are there, right? Even if you don't have obvious alternatives, like obvious competitors, there are, right? So for, I don't know, for Facebook, the alternative is watching Netflix, right? For Netflix, the alternative is going to the movies, right? For going to the movies, the alternative is going for ice cream or whatever, right? So basically, there is always the alternative to something, to some problem, right? So for you to painstakingly wrote down every single alternative that your persona might have to solve that particular problem. In our case, the alternative is working with super expensive compliance and security auditors, right? Or using the incumbent solutions. And the fourth thing is why. Why you are unique, why your solution matters, right? Where's your differentiation? And you don't have to limit yourself to only one use case. Use case means taking all these variables as a single package and then trying to find your messaging, find the distribution channels, find the product market fit with every single use case, right? And a business can have 4 different use cases, you can have 5 different use cases, or you can have 2 different, it doesn't matter. But you are not limited to only one, individual use case. So if you nailed your positioning properly, you're halfway there to kind of having a proper background upon which you can then build your market entry, no matter whether you do sales rep driven, acquisition, whether you do digital marketing driven acquisition, etc. There's a few cases where you can, of course, skip this because your problem and your solution is just so incredibly obvious. So, for example, smartphone cases from Burga or, anything else. Not to say anything against Burga, I'm just saying that it's just so obvious thing which they're selling, right? So you don't have to invent the positioning from scratch. But in all the other cases, if you don't nail this, you shouldn't, do anything else.
Okay, we have some homework to do, guys. Define your persona, and you are well off already. So, Amit, talking about healthcare, and for example, right, I'm building a healthcare product from Lithuania, and I need to enter France. Completely different system, nuances, all of that, right? So how I can hack my way through, for example, there?
France or any other place. I think very important thing, and we've discussed with you this a couple of days earlier, healthcare is a really rewarding place to be for those who are determined enough and who are resilient. Because it usually takes, the market entry is really, the bar is really high, but the returns are also pretty delightful if you're long enough and you're successful enough. So I guess the first things first is you have to think about the regulatory part, which is so big, and as you mentioned, cybersecurity is so similar, right? I presume. Is so high. So, and regulatory thing is like, a gatekeeper to a beautiful garden, and that gatekeeper might not let you in the garden if you don't comply with the rules. So you have to really think through where you want to be. If you want to be in France, you have to take a look into the regulatory positioning in France. If you want to enter the market in the US, you have to think about if it's a medical device, for example, you have to think about FDA. And sometimes people really underestimate how long it might actually get you through the door to get in and to get all of the approvals. So I think regulatory is definitely number one, not only the FDA/CE marks in Europe, but also from the patient safety perspective, the data safety perspective, HIPAA versus GDPR. So all these things that might be really costly, especially in the healthcare field, that might literally ruin your business. And now we hear a lot of backlash on companies like 23andMe, the DNA testing companies, and all of the other tech startups that used to collect the data and then failed a little bit, and now they're in like massive legal battles with patients about leaking the data. So I think regulatory is number one. If I could speak from the investor perspective, in the last 2 years, I've looked into 200 startups that are in digital diagnostics alongside with our team. And we have 70 criteria, even more, and then you dissect those criteria, how you evaluate whether the startup is good enough to proceed or not good enough. So you have to look into many things. If it's a digital diagnostic, for example, tool, how accurate is your solution, right? Because if it's not accurate enough, if it's good enough but not good enough, no one's gonna buy your product. You're gonna be stuck. Another thing that is so important is if you'll be able to get reimbursement for the product, because maybe you wanna sell a fancy new CGM. Right now, there's a big trend to have a continuous glucose monitoring on your arm. It's like a badge of honor. But who's gonna pay? Like, will I don't know, a simple person buy and pay for the product 300 euros or 150 euros per month? I don't know. That's a great question. So you really have to think: will you be able to get reimbursement from the government? And if your product will comply with the rules to get that reimbursement from the national healthcare systems, for example, as you mentioned in France, right, or Lithuania, will it be covered by the national healthcare insurance? In the U.S., you have to comply with CPT code, so-called. So you have to understand these things, and in order to understand these things, you have to have people who kind of understand these things. So for example, in our fund, because one thing is to only get the money and have the capital. Great, I have, I don't know, 500K. Now I'm gonna build a successful startup. It's not gonna happen in healthcare, for example, probably in many other highly regulated places, because you might skip these tiny little important steps that might literally make your startup a failure. So, for example, at our fund, we have around 30 experts, we call them, experts, EIRs, experts in residence, who usually sometimes come on the board of the advisory of the startup to help them navigate the really complex US regulatory market. And healthcare is such a complex field. We have people who understand the reimbursement models, the CPT codes, who understand, health tech, femtech, oncology, like all of these different fields, because even as an investor, you not necessarily understand that deep enough all of these tiny little things. So having the know-how and being able to build that trust is very important. And if I may add another tiny little thing about trusting.
Sure, go ahead.
So I made a quick question. I put up on my LinkedIn a quick question a couple of days ago because I wanted here to come prepared with data, not a scientific research, but just a quick question that a quick quiz that I put on my LinkedIn. And I asked, which doctor would you choose? Because I think that kind of reflects how we decide on our healthcare services, some of that are a little bit more regulated. And I asked my colleagues, friends, acquaintances, people on LinkedIn, would you pick a physician who is very highly visible on the media, or would you rather go with somebody who has no media presence? And guess what people choose?
I was wrong actually with my answer. It's not.
There's no right or wrong. It's just how you pick.
Yeah.
But the majority picked 80% of the people who answered, and there were around 100 respondents. They said that they would pick a physician that has no social media presence. And how do they pick? How do they make the decision how to pick that physician? Is based on the recommendation, referral, or other ways of acquiring knowledge. And it's not about being social and present on media. So healthcare is a little bit of a different field, and I think this is really interesting. Interesting observation. That not necessarily that you put a lot of money on the, Facebook ads or whatever gonna make you successful. You have to think of other creative ways.
It's a different animal.
Woof.
Way different, right? And Gitte, let's talk about hacking a bit, right? There's a bunch of buzzwords: grow hacking, fast iterations, throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks. But you have completely different different opinion about that. So maybe you can share your take on this.
Many people think about about hacking like super quick wins, which is sometimes true. The only thing that I agree about the hacking is that it has to be fast, right? You need to establish very fast and as fast as possible feedback loops, whether what you're doing is working or not. However, the sad reality is that you shouldn't expect to throw a bunch of stuff on the wall and see what sticks all the time, because you will basically burn out your teams. You will start fading your focus on what you're doing, and you will lose the sense of what you're doing, right? If the hacking is related to growing like in general, that instead of giving you incremental performance. So basically, if we go back to the use case exercise, which I gave you before, you should have enough understanding about your buyer to start thinking super strategically, what is their behavior to which I can tap into and then extract value and basically attach myself to that behavior. The good example would be in cybersecurity, the NIS2 compliance. How many of you know about NIS2 regulation? Yes, at least 2 people. Awesome. So we have a long way to go. But basically, what... Carlo, you didn't raise your hand. You know about it well. So basically, NIS2 is what it's doing is European Union is establishing this incredibly painful framework that everyone will have to comply with, which basically forces you to take care of security, not only your organization, but your vendors' organizations, right? Which means that you will have to make sure that any B2B SaaS, any digital services provider, or even non-digital solutions provider that your company is using, you are personally making sure that they are digital security compliant, which is extreme new pain for the market to take care of. And this leads to the behavior of everyone sending this security questionnaires of insane size, sometimes from 100 to 200 questions per questionnaire, and then company CTOs have to deal with this stuff, right? Personally, one by one, right? So you understand what's the current user behavior, sending and dealing with insane amount of questionnaires. You understand the pain point, which is spending enormous amount of time to handle all the, by default, custom questions, right? Even though you might have answers to some of them. So the solution in this case, even though this is not a default cyber upgrade proposition, but we're launching a free tool for CTOs to help deal with cybersecurity questionnaires in minutes instead of days or weeks, right? And we're launching this as a free tool to acquire new traffic, which we will then convert into premium users. So this is a good example of a well thought through growth hack, if we might call this, right? Which has some strategic thought behind this, right? I'm not saying that all of your hacking should take 3 to 4 weeks to prepare, right? You can be very much faster, but then don't expect for you to regain any kind of competitive knowledge, competitive edge for longer than 3 days. A good example would be, I launched the previously B2C startup where we figure out that some of our questions with the user onboarding are a bit too sensitive, so we want to desensitize them. So after someone answered some question, we followed up with some empathetic insert, as we call them, right? So someone says that, all right, I'm dealing with anxiety issues. All right, we'll follow up with the loader screen saying, That's sad to hear, but like 80% of our other users are also dealing with that, so you're in good hands, right? So you ask some sensitive question, you desensitize the reaction, and so you don't make your funnel anxious, basically, right? So what happened? It worked super nice, everyone was super happy, and then literally our number one competitor, to which we were always kind of putting ourselves against with, they literally copied every single decision that we made. I'm not saying that this kind of drove down our results, right? But it doesn't mean that we retained our competitive edge in terms of user acquisition, right? So short-term solutions lead to short-term gains that get competed away much, much faster instead of strategic, quote-unquote, hacking.
Very good point, Gita. And we're running out of time, but let's touch upon the easiest part, right? So we entered the market successfully. How to sustain the growth, right? So guys, very quickly, just main thoughts about that one, maybe a bit from the healthcare perspective.
Because we have just a couple of minutes left, I just want to send a couple of messages. The message number one is you have to have a community. I've met quite a few super massively successful people throughout the last couple of years, and some of them that they had is having a community. The fact that there are so many people right here, right now, when it's pouring and raining, I just wanted to encourage everyone to connect with each other and connect to the people. If your startup is operating in one or another field, in that field, connect to those communities, either Facebook communities, somebody who will support. In healthcare, for example, if you use, for example, referrals in some fields, it might be even considered as a kickback, and you might really get in a lawsuit, and it's kind of a gray line that you shouldn't be crossing. So anyway, to cut a long story short, because we just have a couple of seconds, I just want to wish everyone who are here to not be shy and to connect with each other and ask for help in whatever you're doing. Yeah.
Okay, community for growing. Makes sense, right? And Gita, what are your main thoughts? I know that you're betting more on the recurring revenue, right? Like sustaining the growth.
You can't expect long-term growth without focusing on retention. So a few very, very successful Lithuanian startups have shown everyone a way, which is super great, that you have to focus on first-time transaction ROAS, which is great, right? Because if you return all your acquisition investments, you get ROAS 1 plus whatever, or 2 plus whatever. You have enough cash to reinvest. But the difference between companies that are growing long-term is that those who are continuing to pour money back into the product, which leads to revenue retention, instead of being happy with the first-time revenue and then, doing something else, totally new from scratch. So basically, if you're not focused on retention, then you are kind of destined to always try to grow your revenue through new acquisition, which leads to you to basically be dependent on the same acquisition channels or have this nightmare of always trying to find new acquisition channels. So retention is absolutely key.
Amen. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Amir. Thanks, Gitis, for spending some time today with us. Thanks, audience, for being here, and stay dry.